Welcome students to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. K.S. Nagaraja of Deccan College, Pune, teaching the course of Historical Linguistics. Today we look at the module South Asia as a linguistic area, or also popularly called areal studies. In the classification of languages, we had looked at the fact that there are three criteria on which the classifications are possible. One is genetic, the other is type or typological, and the third is area or areal classification. While the genetic classification gives us families, while the typological classification gives us types or typologies, the third classification based on area gives us areal classification or areas due to convergence or convergence areas. So in this module, we look at how this concept has been applied to the languages of this subcontinent, how far it is really relevant, and what are the ramifications of this concept taken to smaller areas of our country. For the study of resemblances among languages based on geographical rather than genetic relationships is called areal linguistics. In fact, while discussing classification of languages, we had discussed the three types of classifications: genetic, typological, and areal. So this areal classification is extended here further into this particular area concept. It may refer particularly to the study of linguistic areas, or more broadly to the study of the geographical distributions of linguistic phenomena generally, and often also to the history of those distributions. For the synchronic study of distributions, linguistic geography would be a convenient term, but that has come in many quarters to mean dialect geography, the detailed mapping of mainly phonetic and lexical variables within a single language community. The study of linguistic areas is concerned rather with phenomena that straddle language boundaries and especially genetic boundaries. Note Emeno's widely quoted definition of a linguistic area: an area which includes languages belonging to more than one family but showing traits in common which are found not to belong to the other members of at least one of the families. It has been recognized that a tendency for languages gradually to converge in structure and idiom with their immediate neighbors could be accepted as a process complementary to that of their gradual divergence from a common ancestor. The breaking down of old systems is compensated for by the building up of new ones, and such building manifests a direction imparted to it by the structures prevailing in neighboring languages. The process responsible for these patterns of resemblances is presumed to be borrowing, and the agent is believed to be the bilingual individual. These factors may lead to the formation of linguistic areas, that is, zones within which the process of convergence are seen to operate with special strength and urgency, presumably because conditions like geographic, historical, political, cultural, and the like have been particularly favorable for mutual fertilization among the languages within such zones. The scholars of Prague School like Jakobson, Matthias, Trinka, Skalika were the first to identify such areas, followed by more specific formulation by Emeno in 1956. A number of such areas have been pointed out so far: the Caucasus, the Balkans, Northern Eurasia, Ethiopia, and of course India or South Asia. Sometimes the affinities have only been phonological. Elsewhere, like in India, the convergence has been shown to embrace syntax, morphology as well. There are many scholars who have worked on this kind of concept or had come to know that when languages belonging to different families are spoken in a given area, geographically contiguous area or in contact situation, the languages get affected. Both the languages get affected. That is the important feature. Jacobson pointed out that a given language may belong to several single feature-based linguistic areas at once. Thus, Marathi would be peripherally part of an ergative area and at the same time, according to Emino, part of the counter word area. Or affricates in Marathi and Telugu and some dialects of northern Kannada, noun classifiers found in eastern group of languages, including Assamese and others, belong to same type. Obviously, single features or single isoglosses will not be adequate to establish an area as acceptable linguistic areas. They are either extra-Indic in their reach or too restrictive in their distribution to make a mark. Therefore, more features need to be looked at with their distribution and reach. The question is, do criteria that hold India together and distinguish it from neighboring areas overshadow in number or somehow in kind such criteria as the above, which attach only parts of India to neighboring areas and together form no pattern? In other words, does an Indian linguistic area emerge as a significant entity with the area itself apparently a factor of some importance? The Indian area offers especially good material for such study. It involves hundreds of languages from at least 4 clearly distinct genetic stocks or language families: Indo-Aryan, Dravidian, Austroasiatic, and Tibeto-Burman. There has been good deal of work on the languages of this area, including Grierson and Jules Bloch, who were the earliest ones to consider that India is a linguistic area. The term linguistic area was invented by H.V. Welton in 1943, who used it as a translation of the German Sprachbund. Since Emino's initial interest in the problem and his path-breaking paper of 1956, other scholars have been engaged in the investigation of diffusion and borrowing of linguistic traits in terms of Emino's basic methodology. What is this methodology? Basically, it involves bipolar type. The first necessity is to establish a typological feature as pan-Indic and at the same time not extra-Indic. Once several features have been established as having the same boundaries, so that there is an approximation to a bunching of isoglosses, the linguistic area can be considered to be typologically firmly established. The second part of the methodology is a historical one. It is an investigation into the language of origin of the feature in question, its direction of diffusion throughout the languages of the area, and the attempt to relatively or if possible absolutely date the event. Emino's path-breaking work on the problem of linguistic area and the subsequent work by other scholars in this area has resulted in identifying many features as areal, the wide occurrence of retroflex consonants, the increasing occurrence of gerunds, use of the quotative particle in the Rig Veda of certain type of onomatopoetics and echo words, and also of many items of borrowed vocabulary. Most often, the direction of the diffusion was found to be from Dravidian and Munda into Indo-Aryan. Perhaps the most important summary treatment of this field, apart from the collection of Emino's papers, is by Colin Massikas, his work defining a linguistic area, South Asia, where he deals with word order, causative verbs, conjunctive particles, explicator compound verbs, and the dative constructions. This work is of particular interest to some foreign scholars also, like Japanese scholars, since its author takes Japanese as one of the important languages for typological comparison with the languages of South Asia, including Dravidian. It appears that the entire vast region from Japan down to South Asia has been marked by elaborately hierarchical social structures reflected in language. It was an area of divine kinships, accompanied in some instances by elaborate class-caste structures. In Massikas' book, we indeed find striking typological parallels among the many languages of this vast region, and it seems obvious that some other parallels manifested in the linguistic status patterns or superstructures developing from these elaborate sociological systems. So, a list of linguistic traits which have been proposed so far by various scholars can be listed. Most of the languages of India, of whatever the family, have a set of retroflex versus dentals and alveolar sounds. The retroflexes include stops, nasals, trills, and laterals. Retroflex phones existed even in the earliest Vedic Sanskrit. These sounds are, on the whole, unknown elsewhere in the Indo-European languages. And they are certainly not Proto-Indo-European, according to Emino, 1956. On the other hand, Dravidian retroflexes, in contrast with other consonants, are without the slightest doubt a Proto-Dravidian feature. As Emino says, retroflexes are a clear instance of Indianization of the Indo-European component in the Indic linguistic scene, particularly when taken in correlation with similar contemporary phenomena. Another phonological example of obvious diffusion, although on a much more limited scale, is discussed by Emino. It is the representation of Old Indo-Aryan palatals in Marathi by affricates ch, j before front vowels and by the affricates th, z before back vowels. A similar distribution is found in the Indo-Aryan Vadiya and in the Dravidian Telugu and also to some extent Northern Kannada. These languages, Marathi, etc., form a continuous band across the subcontinent, and the trait undoubtedly originated in one language and spread to the others from it. However, it is not known which language was the future originator. Probably Telugu is a guesswork. On the morphosyntactic side, perhaps the most striking phenomenon is the abundance of the form which Jules Bloch called gerundage, or in simple terms in English, gerund, or also known as absolutives. A general Dravidian construction found in ancient Tamil grammatical tradition, Vinaye Echem, that is, that which is incomplete without a finite verb, it means. A general Dravidian construction found in Sanskrit already in the earliest texts, but not in Iranian branch, that's very important. Although it is not a general Indo-European construction, is such in which predications are strung together in temporal or cause-effect succession each predication ending with a non-finite verb form, that is, one that cannot end a sentence, and the whole sentence being completed with a predication ending with a finite form, MNO. This is indeed a prominent standard feature of Dravidian and one of the syntactic traits of Sanskrit that distinguishes it from other Indo-European languages. Another syntactic feature discussed by Kuiper in his 1967 paper is the use of iti as a marker following a direct quotation, a peculiar feature of Indo-Aryan within the Indo-European family found already in the Rig Veda as well. The Dravidian parallel is the quotative verb en or on to say so, and its rigidly fixed position following a direct quotation. It has been pointed out long ago that modern Indo-Aryan, like Dravidian, add the same inflectional morphemes of cases to distinct stems for singular and plural, which is unlike the general Indo-European inflectional practice. According to MNO, this is convincingly to be interpreted as evidence of borrowing from Dravidian. The echo word construction mentioned by Jules Bloch has been discussed by a number of scholars. It is usually a construction in which a basic word is followed by an echo word in which the initial group CV of the basic word is replaced by a morpheme ki or gi or u, or rarely by some other morpheme, and the rest echoes the rest of the basic word. The meaning of the echo word is and the like and something like that, or it simply adds the connotation of uncertainty or vagueness coupled with a certain amount of emphasis and expressivity. There are many variations, but nearly all Dravidian languages exhibit the sequence ki or gi. For example, Tamil, Panam, Kinam, Sammani, and the like. Kannada, Puli, Gili, a tiger and some animal like that. Most notable is the fact that the construction is found in all three families, there being good evidence for Dravidian, fairly good evidence for Indo-Aryan, and good evidence for at least Sora in the Munda family. However, it is true in what MNO says, we need more detailed evidence and analysis. Echo words are a pan-Indic trait, and it is apparently not an Indo-European feature. It is probable that Indo-Aryan received the trait from non-Indo-Aryan. At present, we can hardly say anything more on this. Both Dravidian and Indo-Aryan show a great proliferation of onomatopoetics. Their systems are remarkably parallel and have been discussed in detail by MNO. His conclusions are as follows. In the language families of India, there is a common pattern of onomatopoeics with great proliferation of items in all the languages and some aerial etymologies. The Indo-Iranian family does not inherit the pattern from Indo-European. Hence, we may postulate diffusion of both the pattern and some etymological items from the indigenous families into Indo-Aryan. MNO's study concentrated on such diffusion from Dravidian into Indo-Aryan. Another feature presented is causative formation in the verbal system. Latin, Germanic, and Slavic evidence shows that Sanskrit drew from its Indo-European origin the beginnings of its rich causative formation, which continues with much development in Middle Indo-Aryan and with much restructuring in simplex transitive causative, or as MNO prefers to call them, simplex causative of causative. This NIA system is in its complexity reminiscent of the Dravidian causative system. Dravidian, generally speaking, we should set up 4 stems: intransitive, causative of intransitive, transitive and causative of transitive. To show the difference between the new Indo-Aryan system and the Dravidian system, Emeno introduced a new terminology. The new IA system contains, according to him, simplex, causative, causative of causative, while the Dravidian system contains simplex, mediative of simplex, causative, mediative of causative. Emeno found the fourfold system of Toda, Kotha, Kodagu and Malayalam. He was uncertain whether such sets of four forms should be reconstructed for Proto-Dravidian. However, IA shows a chronologically progressive complexity in its system, carrying it in the direction of, but not to identify with, the South Dravidian system. Convergence with Indianization of IA is the tempting solution. Emeno, in his 1974 paper, proposed two additional aspects as evidence for the existence of the Indian area of linguistic diffusion and convergence. Among them, one is an instance of a morpheme with a complex semantic structure. The two language families, Dravidian and Indo-Aryan, have the same semantics but quite different phonological representations of the morpheme, expressing addition and meaning also and even. In Sanskrit, this is api, inherited in phonetic shape from Indo-European. In Dravidian, it is probably un. According to Emeno, we have the same five usage semantic structure represented in Sanskrit by api and in Dravidian or Proto-Dravidian by There must be some historical relation between the two, since none of the Sanskrit semantic structure inherited from Indo-European, not even from Indo-Iranian. Given bilingualism between the two families in North India at this period, there is no probable solution for our problem other than diffusion from Dravidian into Indo-Aryan. The Sanskrit usages are essentially a calque of Dravidian by Sanskrit api. Masica, 1976, discussed five features: word order, causative verbs, conjunctive participles, explicator compound verbs, and the dative construction. Among them, the last one has been fully accepted as a Indian linguistic area or a areal trait. Dative subjects. The languages of South Asia make a distinction between subjects who act, perform, or do an action from those subjects who undergo, experience, have, become of something they have no control over. That is, these languages make a very sharp distinction between performative and non-performative actions, as the effect of the two are reflected distinctly on the respective subjects of the sentence. Semantically, the constructions are non-agentive in nature and thus imply an involuntary experiencer, benefactor, or recipient subject. A kind of semantic passive is indicated on the part of the non-agent or dative subject. A few examples will show it. Masica states predications involving experiences, particularly experiences of states or conditions that can be definitively only or primary to the subject undergoing them, are treated differently in some languages from predications involving external acts, states, or conditions, while other languages make no distinction here. Such experiences, which we may call subjective, typically include liking and disliking, states of health or sickness, happiness or unhappiness, dreaming, feeling, remembering, thinking, embarrassment, pity, doubt, pain, thirst, hunger, sleepiness, anger, urgency, and knowing itself. This category of subjective experience, as we might call it, is paradoxically marked in the languages that distinguish it by describing it from an external point of view, that is, by putting the experiencing subject in an oblique case, most commonly the dative, and either making the experience itself the grammatical subject, or less commonly using an impersonal and generally deleted grammatical subject. Semantically, the constructions are non-agentive in nature and thus imply an involuntary experience, benefactor or recipient subject. A few illustrations make it clear. In Hindi, मुझे बुखार है, I have fever. मुझे मिठाई पसंद है, I like sweets. मैं घर जाऊंगा, राम मैं घर जाऊंगा, I will go home. Ram अच्छा लड़का है, Ram is a good boy. In Kannada, similar construction we can see, ನನಗೆ ಜ್ವರ ಬಂದಿದೆ, I have got fever. ಅವನಿಗೆ ನಿದ್ದೆ ಬಂದಿದೆ, he has slept. ನಮಗೆ ಈ ಮನೆ ತುಂಬ ಚಿಕ್ಕದು, this house is very small for us. ನಾನು ಮನೆಗೆ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೇನೆ, I will go home. In the above illustrations, both Hindi and Kannada distinguish between A and B constructions. While A is dative subject construction, B is non-dative subject construction. English does not make a distinction between those two types. This can be replicated with other Indian languages, except perhaps Khasi, a Mon-Khmer language spoken in Meghalaya. Another feature discussed by Masika in that work deals with word order in constructions, though it is almost pan-Indic, except Khasi again. It is extra-Indic in the sense that same order is found in many language families of outside South Asia. Therefore, its significance may be not much. Masika has listed all the features considered so far by various scholars in his book. There have been various attempts to consider many other features from this point of view, but not many of them have passed the test. Similarly, proposals to establish micro-linguistic areas like Nilgiri linguistic area have been made by some scholars like Zwelabil and others. Time only will test whether those proposals can be accepted or not. To summarize then, the concept of convergence is an important one which was overlooked by the other models of genetics and typology. So when the languages come in contact, there is a lot of convergence, and this feature has been shown to be very significant. This aspect of linguistic area is not only restricted to India, Indian subcontinent, but also found elsewhere like Balkan areas as well. We have looked at various features of great significance, like the presence of retroflex sounds, the presence of iti and comparable word in the Dravidian, onomatopoeia, echo formation, dative constructions, etc. All these reflect the fact that there has been a great amount of convergence. So the Indian linguistic area probably is well established. Taking the linguistic area as such, we can further look at regional linguistic areas or sub-linguistic areas like Nilgiri areas or Marathi, Kannada area. Further, probably we can look at the Orissa situation, where there are lots of languages belong to different families. There also we can identify many features of this nature. So the need of the hour is to study the convergence tendencies across and establish more sub areas as of significant points or convergence areas. So students could read, a lot of literature has come now on this topic, can benefit from the literature both in the e-version and the book version. Thank you.